All right. Imagine we're going to do some sort of classic cold open. That doesn't make
That was it. It's about as cold. See, when you wait so long in between filming podcasts, everything just kind of goes cold. So this whole podcast will just be a cold open.
So you like donuts, eh?
Uh-huh.
Well, have all the donuts in the world!
More.
I don't understand it. Went mad in 15 minutes.
All right.
Episode 14 of the What's the Point GPP Performance Podcast.
Okay, yeah. So we are actually on episode 9.
Close. I was close.
Yeah, we're on episode 9. And welcome to the What's the Point podcast. I'm Jonathan Goose Helton, and this is Chris Wicus.
Hey, and we're in the midst of a global pandemic.
That is, strangely enough, not hyperbole.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's like, no, we're living it. It's kind of weird. Stuff is, I mean, at least for us, I know for you, it's not really like that severe yet, but things in Florida are starting to turn towards like curfews and required isolation.
Yeah, we're getting there. LA is already there. San Francisco is already there. San Diego will probably follow suit soon.
So this is a interesting time, and I'm sure we'll probably actually get a lot more people signing in and listening to this podcast, just because people have more time on their hands to listen to podcasts. So thank you for joining us. If you haven't joined us before, like Goose was saying, we have another 8 episodes of this where we answer questions, we talk about topics relevant to performance and ultimate frisbee, we joke around a bunch. So if you have the time, which you will, because you're probably all working from home, hopefully you have some way to continue your employment remotely. And if not, let us know if we can help you with anything in regards to like, we have a large network of people. So if you have a specific skill set, we might be able to put you in contact with someone else who can use you remotely right now. Don't be a stranger. Feel free to reach out to us.
We don't know a lot of people with the specific skill sets that are referenced in the movie Taken. So if you're one of those people, then we can't help you. But we do know a lot of other people. And
one of the other business owner, Tim Bowe, owns a crossbow. He's actually very vocal about letting everyone know that he owns a crossbow.
It's mostly you, because you moved in the same state as him.
Yeah, he lets me know that he owns a crossbow. And he also lets me know that in Florida, it's a stand your ground state, so that he thinks that he could probably shoot me and get away with it. He's probably right, because, Florida is the epitome of America. There's toilet paper nowhere. And so the thing about that is, like, if you have a full bathroom and your toilet is next to a shower, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
You could have like a really dirty poopy, and you could just walk into that shower and you're good.
Yeah. 20 seconds later, you're right as rain.
You can buy one of those shower attachments that comes off and then just whoop, right up in there. Or you can buy one of those bidet attachments for your toilet, the heated toilet seat with you can have it play music and can spray like incense into the room. I don't know. I don't know if that's what actually happens. That was what the toilets are like. So in Tokyo, if you go to there's 7-Elevens everywhere, but not the same 7-Elevens that there are in America.
A different caliber.
The worst part of that is that you can't get Slurpees, which is like the staple of American 7-Elevens.
Monica, if you're watching this, how do you do this? You're so burly. I just got so much Slurpee. I want Slurpee. Okay, I left him. Slurpee. I want Slurpee.
And you can't get like taquitos that are just rolling on those metal heater things.
Right.
That's a travesty. But all of their bathrooms are super nice. And they all have heated, like electronic toilet seats that play music. You actually can press a button so that it plays music while you're taking a dump so that people in the store can't hear you.
That's great.
Beautiful.
A little bit of privacy.
And then it sprays you in the butthole at the end. You got to be into that, though. Anyways. That should be the cold open, and then we should actually start the show now.
Yeah, maybe. They're actually on a related topic, even though this is definitely going down a rabbit hole. There was
going down a toilet bowl hole.
Yeah, police showed up at a Home Depot recently because some guy made a joke about he was gonna drop a bomb in the public bathroom and was like warning people that he was gonna do that, and somebody just like heard it the wrong way, and so police showed up, and Home Depot said that they understood the joke and that they wouldn't be pressing charges. So that's very kind of them.
Yeah, so I guess that's a valuable lesson for people to learn is you can't make bomb jokes in airports and you can't make bomb jokes in Home Depot.
Not in Home Depot, no.
Maybe like Walmart, you're good.
Yeah.
That might be more your speed. Target. Well, yeah, that joke just kind of wrote itself.
So,
anyways, What's the Point Podcast, episode 9.
Yeah, we are in March of 2020. So the global pandemic, in case there's any confusion, is about COVID and coronavirus. And here in the United States, for those of you who may be watching internationally, I don't know how your culture and your government is handling things, but right now we've all been urged to some extent of quarantining and social distancing. The CDC most recently is telling everyone to minimize gatherings of 10 people or more. In fact, like just to avoid that altogether. And this is obviously having an impact on businesses, people's employment, and very relevant to our audience, their ability to train in many cases and go show up in a gym. I know that the majority of gyms have closed. Mine is a little bit unusual. They've just decided to like up their ante on cleaning things and are not allowing, it's a big gym, not allowing more than 30 people in at a time. So they're feeling pretty confident that they can help people continue to remain healthy and fit during what is otherwise like just absolute bananas time here.
Yeah. It's a really unfortunate thing for gyms because they have rent to pay, and the only way that they make money is by having the people and the customers coming through the doors, right. Especially gyms that rely heavily on personal training.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see there's a lot of different gyms that are trying to go the digital and online training route, but we're gonna unfortunately have a lot of businesses that go under because of this craziness.
Certainly.
That's kind of a sad story.
So on that topic, we'll cover some details about what training might look like for you, especially if you're a GamePoint Performance subscriber, and how to manage at-home training and outdoor training in lieu of being able to go to the gym, whether it's closed or just inadvisable to go. And also how some of your seasons may be affected. Most specifically, I think we'll end up talking a little bit about U.S. college. And then we'll, at the end, wrap up with what is Chris reading, which is my new favorite question to ask at the conclusion of these podcasts. But we'll start with some Q&A, our little mailbag section. So do you have the questions pulled up, Chris?
I do.
Okay.
Are we doing the minute thing?
Yeah, let's keep them short.
Okay. So we typically try to answer these questions in under 60 seconds so that we don't, because either of us could go on a tangent and then end up talking about something for 10 minutes. And when I say either of us, I mean myself. Goose is a little more terse and concise with how he speaks. This first one is funny because it's about events
Right.
ultimate events like Layout and Mars. And if we're going to have GPP teams for events like those. And
Right.
Joel, I don't know when the next time organized Frisbee is going to happen. So I don't know, bro.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Other Frisbee businesses and like groupings of people often throw together teams for these for fun Frisbee events. Like Cut Camp has a layout team. GPP, that'd be a great idea. I'd love to see that happen. We can all like get to know each other better and enhance this sense of community. But right now, that's going to be on hold. It would be really cool to identify some of these major events that people like to attend and figure out which ones we've got enough people interested in going to where we can actually make this sort of thing happen, whether it's a Kaimana sort of event or a layout or whatever it is. But we'll ping the group as time goes on and as we get a little bit more clarity about what Frisbee looks like in 2020.
That was a better answer than mine. Next one. That was Joel Prushen who said that. I don't know if that's how you say your last name, Joel, so I apologize. You want to read the next one?
Sure. Austin asks, what's the best way to maintain speed, power, and endurance when dealing with foot or ankle injuries that prevent running or sprinting?
Is this me?
Yeah, I'll set the shot clock.
Okay.
Feel free to go ahead and get a running start.
All right. Okay, Austin. So typically we need to know what type of injury you have to your foot. There could be a lot of different things that you're dealing with. You could have turf toe. You could have some type of general plantar fasciitis. You could have some type of ankle anterior impingement. You could have sprained your ankle and rolled it laterally. So it's tough to know exactly what to say here when you haven't been specific, but in general, when something is wrong with your lower leg that doesn't allow you to run or sprint, you have to try to pick something that is a similar frequency to what you were doing. So a lot of times that could be like using an air bike with the handles and trying to go 4 strides per second, or using battling ropes and trying to do 4 strides per second, using kettlebells that don't need you to plantar flex and dorsiflex at your ankle and things like that. And also remembering that if you have a healthy leg, you can still use that leg to train as well.
Wow. Really well done. Time has just now expired.
Okay. I mean, I could have kept going, but
Sure.
and if it doesn't go away quickly, see someone about it. And if it always happens, you always have symptoms when you're doing something specific like cutting or jumping, then it's possible that how you cut or jump is incorrect.
Right.
So get some coaching.
Yeah. And if you need, and this goes for anybody, if you need to see a PT, we have an ever-growing network of physical therapists that we know and trust, and that see the body and compensation patterns the way that we do. So reach out to us and we can help you find those people.
Yeah, we've connected tens of athletes. I mean,
Dozens.
Literally, there are literally dozens of us.
Yeah. What is that? Is that a throwback to I Bleed Black?
No, the literally dozens of us is the Never Nudes from Arrested Development.
Oh, well, it's that as well. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The next question comes from Ben Dieter. My boy Ben, teammates on Boneyard, and we were teammates on Flyers. An ageless wonder, if you will. Are there principles for timing increases in the amount of weight for the prescribed exercises? So what he's asking clarification on is, for example, to maximize performance, is it better to lift heavier in the season or off season?
Am I answering this or are you answering this?
I mean, either of us could answer this. I think it'd probably be better to come from you.
Okay. You got my timer?
I got it. I'm ready.
Ready and go. Principles, timing increases the amount of weight. Okay. So the reason why we tend to lift less in terms of volume in season is just because there's more going on in terms of sports specificity. when it comes to like what you want to move with heavy weights or not, like the reason why we have recommendations for moving explosively in season is so that you're not compressing yourself for long periods of time. Because what you want to be able to do, you have the two movement options, one to expand and one to compress. If you're always compressing yourself under heavy loads and these sort of grinding lifts, you add compression to the system and that robs your ability to rotate and to change direction. So if what my sport involves is highly predicated on changing direction and rotation, then I want to offer enough of a dosage of compression and high intensity lifting in season to keep my outputs high, but not rob myself of the ability to rotate and change direction.
Great. That is exactly 60 seconds.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. And I'll just tack on, hopefully the way that we have designed the programs with, EICR or the tempos of the lifts, as well as the number of reps that we prescribed, helps lend itself to understanding how heavy these weights should be. If we've prescribed, 3 reps, you're probably not doing 100%, but you're also probably not doing 50%. It should still be a challenge to the system. And we're usually pretty specific about the tempos. So when things should be explosive versus a struggle to like move it up or like take a long time to move that weight.
Yeah. When you leave the weight room, you should feel loose. Like I always tell our athletes that we work with in person that if you're leaving the weight room feeling exhausted and like tight, you're not doing the right thing. You need to leave the weight room ready to play. Right. You should feel springy. You should feel loose. You should be able to rotate. You should feel like you're not sore in your hips and shoulders.
Right. Yeah, more is not always more, right?
Less is fewer.
For those of you who don't get that joke, Chris is on a constant evolution in his understanding of less and fewer, the relationship they're in grammar.
It is. I guarantee you it is not only me. I guarantee you 90% of the people tuning into this podcast either they don't even understand that there's a difference or they just don't care.
It could be fewer than 90%.
Yeah, could be. less or more.
Right. But yeah, I mean, that just happened very publicly to Dylan Freechild and Mean Machine on Twitter. So it could happen to anybody.
No one's safe.
No one is.
Grammar is not canceled.
Oh, okay.
Samuel Swenson Reinhold, suitable alternative field workouts when nursing injuries. Okay. Sam, I think we covered this already with you, and I think Kelsey also had some good input, and Nikki Spiva had some good input about this in the discussion thread. So look back at that if you missed that. If you're having issues with your knees and your quads and you're seeing a PT about that, then have them guide your return to play first and foremost. And then once you're ready they give you the okay to go play again, then let us know and we'll try to help you with your, reintegrating back into playing. But general rules of thumb, like just build up slowly. If you can only run 4 cuts before it starts to bother you, then 4 cuts is where you stop. And then try to do 6, and then try to do 7, and then try to do 8, and et cetera, like that.
Right. And looping back to one of the earlier questions, it's like, if this is a persistent thing that happens in specific movements, it's very likely that there are some flaws in your movement that are causing you pain, and therefore seeing a PT, if you're not already, would be a good idea.
Just getting coaching about the movements that are bothering you. Because it's not just like the program necessarily that can help you if it's a technical thing.
Is that Carl or is that other Carl?
That's a little baby dog.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to one of the next questions. This is from our boy, Charlie. He says, in all seriousness, bunches of us can currently do tempos and the field workout outside. As more lockdowns happen, eventually this may change. So some suggestions may be helpful, mostly for the field workout. I am fortunate to have a medium-sized yard with grass and a treadmill that works. Charlie, we'll definitely cover this in detail in the main topic time period of today's podcast. I was just reading Charlie's question about training without access to the gym.
Yeah, just as a general rule and like advice to everyone, don't get a puppy while you're moving somewhere before a pandemic. Not a good idea. She's adorable, but she doesn't listen. It's weird. She also pees everywhere.
Nice.
It's great. It's great.
Then Charlie also asks, secondly, lots of us have had indoor pickup over winter and practices in addition to our training. If we have been training 5 times a week, do we need to do anything additional to fill out that day or practice or pickup? Again, actually, we'll cover this as well, especially for our college athletes that we'll be talking about. And this will apply probably to masters as well, given the time frames being somewhat similar in the main topic discussion right after our Q&A.
Okay.
The same will be true of Morgan's question. Like Morgan's question is very similar.
Yeah, so we'll cover that too. Morgan asked something. So Morgan sent me, just to give everyone a peek behind the curtain here, Morgan sent me more of a personal message about like expecting the worst. Right. So trying to be realistic from a statistician's type of standpoint and a epidemiology standpoint, like what could actually happen with something that gets this out of hand around the world.
Yeah.
We're going to try to play a little more on the optimistic end of things, but it'll be an exercise in worst case scenario. Just know that everything's going to be okay, no matter what happens. Even if you die, everything's going to be okay. Even if we all die, I don't know what to tell you. Like, just go to bed and then you'll wake up.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
Yeah, taxes. Well, maybe not. Taxes they're putting off. So, death is for certain. Taxes, I guess, you have a 90-day lay period now.
I mean, there's still some level of an eventuality to them. So
right.
And our last question for today is going to be from Pavel, a teammate of mine on Team USA. Let's go.
Former Malibu player.
That's right.
I actually used to train him when he was in college.
Yeah.
This was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah. He and I were teammates on Machine, and at that point he was doing some of my triphasic programming as well. So like his worlds have collided in the last 5 years as your and my world has collided. He asked if you can only afford 1 or 2 kettlebells, what weight should they be in percentage of body weight? I like this question because it is also relevant to our main topic today, but we could probably just go ahead and answer it fairly directly. I'll go ahead and take the pressure off of your 90-second response and say, if you have no equipment, the very first things we recommend you look into are a weight vest, preferably an adjustable one, which we have recommended some publicly and within the Facebook group, and then also some resistance bands. That being said,
we will be posting an article that's more of like a consolidation of all of the information that we've been putting out to our Facebook group and the equipment list and stuff like that we've posted. And that will be put up on the website, hopefully by the time that this podcast is out. So if you head to our website, gamepointperformance.com, and you go to the section that has the articles, the homepage.
Yeah.
You'll be able to access that.
Yeah, I think that'll generally be under the top line of learn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Pavel asked about if you could only afford 1 or 2 kettlebells. So the question was about kettlebells and what percentage of body weight they should be. And Goose's answer was actually to buy a weight vest. So the thing about kettlebells is unless you are practiced in kettlebell ballistics, so swings and snatches and high pulls and throws and things like that, there's not a great amount of utility to them. You can use them for rows and you can use them for presses. You can use them for squatting, but they just end up being the same thing functionally as you just holding a bag full of like books or like pots and pans or like a jug of water. It's just a matter of a load that you want to, you're going to be more, it's going to benefit you more if you just use like a duffel bag and just put stuff in it and then hold the duffel bag in front of you than it would be to buy like a 16 kilogram kettlebell and then a 20 kilogram kettlebell and then a 24 kilogram kettlebell. With that being said, if you have disposable income, then you could get a pair of 16 kilogram kettlebells, a pair of 20s, and a pair of 24s, and you'd be able to do a lot of swings, deadlifts, and squats with those and presses. I don't know if that doesn't really necessarily answer his question, but your money would be better spent trying to buy like resistance bands with a handle, suspension training device, weight vests, medicine balls, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you, for the most part, answered it. It's just not on a percentage of body weight front.
Yeah.
Okay.
Adjustable dumbbells too. I would try to buy those before I would try to buy like sets of kettlebells.
Right. Great. So that's our Q&A. Thank you for all of our members that submitted those questions. Hopefully we answered them to your satisfaction. If not, let us know. We'll be happy to.
If you're a member, if you're like a subscriber to GPP and you're not a part of the Facebook group, please join. Like a lot of people recently, because we've started offering this at-home and equipment stuff, have just started flocking to the Facebook group, like 50 people. I don't know why they weren't part of the group to begin with. It's a great place. Like it's a safe space and learning community. We have like learning modules that are starting to be released in there. We talk extensively about different types and techniques of training. We draw our questions for the Q&As in the podcast from the Facebook group. So if you're a member, sign up, request to join. If you're not a member, sign up for a program and you can join the Facebook group. It's a great benefit of being a subscriber. Absolutely.
It's a great community. And it's been really cool to have seen some people express some seemingly heartfelt gratitude for the group, the Facebook group, and the other people who contribute to it in the conversations. They seem to be very encouraged by the other athletes that are training alongside them.
Yeah, it's certainly helpful for us too. I know I'm definitely experiencing anxiety around these times because a lot of uncertainty in the world, being cooped up, getting knocked out of your routine is awful for anyone, especially like people identify themselves through the routines that they have. Like it's like this embedded part of their personality. And when they can't do what they want to do and the expectations that they have for what their life is supposed to be don't match up with what their day-to-day is, a lot of people can just backslide into depression and there's just a lot of mental health issues that can come about. So it's like, we try to be there for each other. We try to like give everyone an opportunity to laugh and dialogue and talk about training at home. And, you know, we want to provide a way for people to have some kind of control when the world seems to be completely out of control.
Absolutely. We had a discussion at Cut Camp one year with some of the kids. One of them had expressed, like, how do you handle, this is something we could go into more at another time. How do you handle like serious injuries and bouncing back from that? Because a lot of Frisbee players have a bit of an identity crisis when they can't play. And I know that is relevant to right now as well, but this is even more significant because not only are the outlets for playing temporarily shut off as like pickup games, practices and tournaments are either canceled or inadvisable, but even the more basic at home and training routines are drastically shifted. Yeah, I mean, it's something that you need to address head on, that, you know, you are in some ways the decisions that you make not just the habits that you've formed and the circumstances you find yourself in.
Absolutely. And it's such a dynamic and self-organizing thing. So you have, if you're a player you're a Frisbee player, and all of a sudden you have some type of ankle injury and you can't run at all, you can't practice, and you're going from playing league 1 day a week, practicing 3 days a week, tournaments every fourth week, training 3 days a week on top of that, to sitting on a couch watching Netflix, your body is going to react to that because you're tearing yourself out of a routine. So what you have to try to do is, we say this a lot, try to keep plan B as close to plan A as possible. So if you're normally practicing 3 nights a week and you can't do that at all, maybe you're going to practice and you're helping your teammates. So you're still present, you're still in the environment, you're still engaging mentally the same way that you would be. Or like, say you can't practice and you're in this state now, like a lot of teams are having meetings, over Zoom or conference calls, like get together as a group, still have that like level of camaraderie, maybe go over film, maybe talk about strategy, just be in the same heads, put yourself in the same headspace, in the same situations that you would normally do, and try not to get so far removed from where you are. Like a really good example of this is me, like presently living in Florida, moving from New York City, where I was personal training people and all over the city, doing 15 to 20,000 steps a day. And all of a sudden I've been kind of ripped out of that environment, and I'm basically just stuck in a house in Florida with a bunch of different, we had a mold problem, and there's like, I'm allergic to the neighborhood that I live in, and it's not great. And so what I had tried to do, without trying to replace things directly, like it was giving me tremendous anxiety. So I've had to like get up in the morning, try to get steps in, walk around, get outside in the sun, make sure that I keep myself busy and schedule my day for myself so that I have created these sort of feedback loops. Because that's one of the big things about like neurotransmitters in your brain, especially dopamine, is it works through like this reward system. So if you know that you have a plan for tomorrow and you need to clean your closet, and that's the one thing that you need to do tomorrow to feel successful and like you did something significant, then as you're doing it, and then once you've done it, this just releases these like feel good like neurotransmitters in your brain, and it creates this like positive feedback loop. But if you don't do that, then you can end up spiraling into this like self-serving like downward spiral of loss of self-control, and just like it just ends up putting you in a scenario where you feel helpless and you feel depressed and you feel like terrible levels of anxiety. So it's kind of a long-winded way of saying, if something has happened that's sort of torn you out of your routine, you need to try to keep as much of that routine as you can, even if it's just adjusted.
Yeah. Similar to what we talk about with training, keeping plan B as close to plan A as possible.
Yeah. And I'll kind of parlay that into what Morgan asked about. If we're assuming the worst and saying like ultimate is just not going to happen this season at all. So the 2020 season is done. So the question was more along the lines of like, how do I adjust my training to have this extended off season? And my answer is going to be similar to what I just said. Like, just keep the plan, keep the goal. Like if you know that your off-season time is when you're going to do most of your strength training and your general work, then we're just going to leave that like that. Preseason, you build up more general sprinting, change of direction, and jumping in preparation for the season where there's high volumes of that change of direction and jumping and sprinting, and tournaments are just like running a marathon basically. So if that's expected at these certain points of the year, which also tend to line up with it being nice outside, then just do those things still. So if you know that a tournament is close to, running 25 miles or something like that or more, then try to get out and build up, tempo running volume, build up sprinting volume into similar capacities. Go play Frisbee with people. If you can't do that, which we're in a current state of that, then take the volumes that you would get from a game and try to split them up into some type of conditioning. So we had a post about like, how do you keep the specificity of the conditioning of Frisbee without playing Frisbee? You emulate a Frisbee game. So if you know that you normally play like 10 points a game, or you play 15 points a game, or whatever it is, like you can put together conditioning circuits that involve you running. Like an example would be like run 70-yard tempo sprint, pause for 10 seconds, shuffle side to side like you're on a mark for 10 seconds, pause, run a cutting pattern, pause, run another cutting pattern, pause, run another cutting pattern, pause, run a sprint. And that would be a point. And you could string a lot of those together and then, visualize playing and checking space and visualizing where the offensive progression would be on the field. And you're there. Like you're imagining, you're like being a little more childlike and imaginative with things, but this will keep you sane and will still keep the goal the goal. Because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if Worlds is going to happen or if it's not going to happen, but why not train expecting it to happen?
Yeah, and Morgan is he's a Masters player, and I think his season is more at risk than maybe club it would be.
Right.
Maybe
Certainly.
It'd probably be at the same level of risk of Worlds and probably college as well. So this advice, these recommendations, especially is true of those people who would find themselves right now to be in season or nearing end season. Those college players, Masters players, this is for you. You can even do this with a training partner that you can socially distance with one another. I think the recommendation right now is just be 6 feet away from each other. So you could build this circuit out. You can pre-plan it. You can ad-lib it a little bit, and one person can be reactive, right? So one person can effectively be the offensive player that has some sort of choreographed or pre-planned routine of cutting pattern and rest, and the defensive person is basically just reacting visually to the stimulus that they're being shown.
Yeah, make it fun. And it's there are a lot of college teams who are training right now, and they're on spring break, or they're going to come back from spring break, and they're going to come back to maybe not playing anymore. And it's very likely that that's the case, but that shouldn't mean that training just stops and then until the end of May you just coast it out. Like, practice and play and train like you would be going to regionals. And then I tell teams that we train that if you're a cusp team that's almost breaking into going to nationals, if your season ends with regionals, don't stop training. Take the rest of the season, train like you're going to nationals. You could train even harder than if you were going to nationals. And you're going to have an entire extra month of hard training in the year. And that over time will pay dividends. So say that you're starting with a pretty young team and you're part of the leadership and you're a freshman on this team. And they're always like in the top 4 at regionals. And then they don't make it the first 2 years. So your freshman and sophomore years, if you were to train from that regionals time to nationals hard, and like you were going to nationals, or harder than if you were going to nationals, then after 2 years you have an entire 10 weeks of training that you've done extra than anyone else, and that could be enough to kind of move you forwards. It's as much about like physical preparation as it is about the mentality of like winning and what it's going to feel like to actually train at that time of year. Because otherwise you get these teams that they finally break into the regional tournament and then they don't know how to win and they don't know what to do there. So then they just kind of like are there and then they're happy to be there and maybe they break seed and that's great. But like, what's the progression there? So if the same thing with regionals, cusp teams that want to go to nationals, if you make nationals, do you just celebrate and then kind of coast for 4 weeks? Or what should you do to train? It's like you've never been there before. So why not train like you're going to be there? And that's kind of my answer. And that's the model that I've always had in my head for training is train for where you want to be, not where you are. So another good example of this would be players who are on the bench that only play a couple points a game should probably train harder than the players that play all the points, especially from a conditioning standpoint. And this is something that's hard to convey in a program like ours, which is trying to meet everyone where they are. But if you're one of these players and you want to take your training seriously and get to the next level, there might need to be some component of extra conditioning, especially during the season, if you're not playing a lot. And that can happen to a lot of people. You can be a star player in high school, go onto a college team, and then ride the bench for the first 2 years. And a lot of those players either get hurt and they never really amount to anything because they kind of peaked in high school. So if you don't want to be that player, then you always have to train like you're going to be one of these starting players. So that's just another instance of keeping plan B as close to plan A as possible, and always keeping the goal of like being the best player that you can be the goal.
Absolutely. And all of that also just goes and corresponds very closely with our general training philosophy of long-term athletic development. This is a season over season approach. It's not, we're 10 weeks out. It's now time to train, and let's push ourselves until we puke. And this is the best way to do this. Oh, the season's canceled. Training is canceled. Yeah. That's just really not. That's not a recipe for success. It is a recipe for early plateaus and potential disasters.
Yeah, and I don't know if I really answered Morgan's question to the best of my ability, so I'll just like surmise it by saying, Morgan, if you love training and you love lifting weights,
he loves lifting weights.
Yeah, you love it, and this question is loaded because it's like you would like to keep training in the off season because you can train like with weights for longer, but I don't think you like running that much. So maybe you should focus on that because it's going to get you out of your comfort zone. And it's going to make you a better player, and it's going to start getting nicer outside. So train like you would be playing for Masters Nationals is what I would say, like as a coach. Get outside, run workouts, maybe double your field workouts if you're not having practices. Like we'll try to have that be part of the discussion in the Facebook group about troubleshooting seasons, but that's definitely a viable option. If you don't have practices currently and you're not running pod workouts, then do them yourself and try to accumulate the same amount of volume of sprinting and running as you would in practice, just in a field workout. So then you end up having like 3 field workouts in a week instead of just thinking about training from only the perspective of the GPP, high A, high B, high C, low A, low B. Right. Because these are all designs taking into account that there's going to be some type of practice in playing. And if there isn't, you can adjust your training volume to match that.
Right. They're not in complete isolation. And what you may find yourself in right now is complete isolation. So you can definitely tack on, especially the more sport relevant, the better. Adding another weightlifting day, that's fine. Maybe less impact for you. It may like be less beneficial for you than having a second or like 2.5 field workouts that you're throwing in there.
Yeah, I would run more tempo runs. I would run more like 10-yard sprints and some short change of direction stuff. Just try to stimulate like the adaptation you're going to get from running more, because you're good at lifting weights, man. So like go get better at running and just use all of these awful circumstances that we have as opportunities to do something else. Like take the constraints that you're being handed and use them to your benefit. Right. Is like the best way to do it. Like if you don't have to work as much and you have extra time on your hands and it's starting to get nice out, go run, go do some running, go throw by yourself. Like Goose and myself at a certain point, like we got good at throwing by just taking discs and going and throwing in a park or on a beach by ourselves. And you're a nerd and you're a loser and you're just I used to just like tell my parents I was going to karate class and take 30 discs that I borrowed from the physical education department of my high school and just go to a field by myself and just throw hucks, short, medium, long hucks for like 2.5 hours. And just run. I was just running tempo runs in between.
Yep. I still do that right now. I'm that loser who has one frisbee, who throws disc at like a set of trash cans that have a closed lid, and I throw it and I go jog down, basically at a tempo run pace, turn around and throw it back, and it's I just practice flat throws, IO throws, OI throws, backhand, forehand, upside downs, offhand, and oftentimes repeat that process.
There you go. Want to get people ask us how to get better at throwing? Throw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean,
stop getting gassed on the field.
Right.
Probably need to run in a way that's specific to running on the field.
So perhaps inadvertently, but also somewhat intentionally, we've answered an implicit question that we've gotten from a lot of people aside from Morgan's very direct question. And that is, if I'm a college player and my team is not practicing right now, we don't know if we're going to have nationals. Our season may in fact be over because we are a regional level team and we've gotten confirmation the regionals is canceled. Like, what should I be doing? And honestly, like, part of this just boils down to like why you play Frisbee. I don't think for most of you, if you're really honest with yourselves, it's to show up to like get an opportunity to play at nationals. That is icing on the cake. And that's the dopamine hit that you want. But a lot of it's the camaraderie and it's like the striving for improvement within yourself and your skill set. Don't let this be something that like derails you entirely from that. You may have other college seasons that you want to be preparing for, and this is a great way to continue to work on that. And as we've mentioned, throwing in
your internet's unstable.
Okay.
But I don't know. I heard you the whole time, so I'm just assuming that it's recording.
Okay, something weird happened there for a moment. I think we're okay now.
Yeah.
But we've hit on how you would adapt the training program to make sure you get your cleats in the ground a little bit more. One thing that there was a question and a sub question that I wanted to make sure that you answered pretty directly, Chris, that we've heard either from people as we've done the Q&A on Sundays on Instagram, or they've submitted emails to our coaches and who like they're premium members or they're college players on a team, and so they're asking these coaches, their GPP coach, for advice and guidance on this. But it's layer one is, how do I transition from college to club if perceivably college is over? And I'd like for you to answer that question as though they're going to play college again. And then I'd like for you to answer that question as though, maybe they're a senior or a fifth year and they're now going to be transitioning to club permanently.
Okay. So there's a lot of instances where college players also play club. I'd say that a large majority of college players also play on club teams. And it's just a matter of like having this double peak. So you're going to end up peaking. It's either going to be like beginning of May or end of May, right? Depending on if you're going to regionals or nationals or if you're sectionals team. So what I would say is, if you are going to be transitioning to club and you're not playing college anymore, I don't know. This is a tough one, honestly, because you could go about it if for the last 4 or 5 years you've played a college season, taken a break after nationals and then picked back up into club and you've had success with it, then maybe that's what you should do. I don't know if there's a best case scenario here. And I don't know, like, if your college season is currently canceled, like, and you are training with your team, I would try to see out the rest of your training with your team, especially now that everyone is isolated and you don't really have this sort of connection. Like, at least through training, you can still keep this level of social accountability and camaraderie with your group. So I would see that through the rest of the season. So let's use as an example, if one of say our college teams that's training with us currently was in a scenario where they know that their season is over, but the team still wants to train, which is great and should be the attitude that the team is taking, especially if they're trying to buy into this whole long-term athletic development training process that we offer, then we could transition the entire group to more of like a preseason for club, which is where they would fall currently. And a lot of these teams have built up their training to a point where they could jump into a preseason, because that's really what position you would be in right now if you were going from college to being a club player. I think we're like 3 weeks into the club preseason, two or three.
Yeah, maybe for a lot of them, like you're somewhere between 3 and 6 weeks in, depending on.
Yeah, so I know this is always. There will always be a certain healthy level of it depends when we answer these questions. So I'm trying to I will always try to offer guidelines that are based in like principle. So what can you do in most cases? What will the truth, like what are the things that are always going to be true given all of these scenarios when you're trying to switch from one training realm to another? It's just, this is not a situation that's going to come up a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so if to kind of finish up on your, like, if you're not playing college anymore,
Yeah.
I mean, the preseason is intended to help you build up playing, like running volumes and like foot strikes and yardage, all those things. If you've been playing college up until 2 weeks ago, you had already been building up for those things, which is great. But you're now in the middle of a reset button, and you're not playing. So it might be time to like revisit preseason volumes in anticipation of what's going to be happening later in the year.
Yeah, and that's what would be happening anyways.
Right.
So it's kind of an answer. It's sort of a question that answers itself if you just fall into the proper point of the training year for what we offer.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically going to just shift. In its greatest simplicity, you're just going to shift your training year to center it around club. And that makes it a pretty easy question to answer. But it's even easier now because you're not playing. So you're not having to worry. Like, we wouldn't want you to be doing preseason stuff centered around club if you're a college player because you're and the season was live, because your training volume would be way too hot. You'd be having practices 3 or 4 days a week, and then we'd be asking you to train 3 to 5 days a week. That wouldn't make any sense. You're probably going to have some overuse injuries and some overtraining involved. You would be doing our in-season programming if the season was still happening. But because it's not and you're transitioning to club, jump into the club area. And if you have a premium coach, if you're like training in that realm, reach out to your coach. I know that some people have already done this and said like, hey, my college season has ended and my college career is essentially over. So I'd like to focus on club. Can you adjust my training accordingly? And that's happening.
Yeah. And you said it really well. This case and this scenario that's been brought up with these questions, it really exemplifies like how the training process works with what we do at GPP, because just like you said, the preseason, it's like part of the reason why like going from a college season right into club works so well is because, like you were saying, the preseason is building up all of this running volume, and you're doing that as your in season for college. It's just the training aspect of like what you do in the gym and in field workouts is dialed back because there's just so much playing and practicing going on. But those are the needs and the qualities that you're going to need in your season as a club player anyways. So you can kind of just sort of go right into and progress right into your preseason training after playing college.
The last question. Oh, well, let's hit on real quickly what's happening if, like, I think this is maybe a simpler question to answer in some ways. If you're a college, let's say you're like a sophomore and you're going to be playing next year, and college is your actual focus. You're probably going to play some club, but you're focused on college primarily. Like, what would you suggest they do for their training right now, assuming that they're not having practices and their season could end in a nationals appearance, or it may not have any more tournaments ahead of it?
Well, take what you were doing in terms of playing and practicing. Try to figure out, like, in your best approximation in your head, like how much running were you doing during the week, how much throwing were you doing during the week, and then try to replace those things as best you can. So if you had 3 2.5-hour practices, then you should probably try to fill in, 7.5 to 7.5 hours of playing time in some way or another. And that can be condensed into training workouts. So say like if you had 3 practices a week that are 2.5 hours, but a lot of them are like talking and downtime, then if you replace that with like an hour field workout, that could suit you well. It's just a matter of like, you're never going to replace playing. in training, but you can try to get as close as possible to it.
Right.
So that just, it requires some type of like needs analysis of what you were currently doing and what you normally do at this time of year, and then you need to try to replace that. But shining back on what we talked about earlier, just try to train in a way that's, you know, similar to what you or how you would be training as a player that was going to go to nationals or was going to have a postseason. Like this time is like the same. Use this time to train the qualities that you would normally be training. So whatever that would normally mean for you and your team. I don't know. It's just kind of the answers to these questions are sort of vague. I know people would really like me to tell them that they need to like run 4,000 yards
Right.
Every time they go out, but it's, you know, I can't say that. Plus, it's like if you haven't really trained in 3 weeks, and I just tell you right away that you need to have like 3 workouts and you run 3,000 yards, then that might not be to your best interest.
Right. Yeah, and also just like the last thing on the subject probably is nothing's going to replace sports skills. We're just talking about the physical preparation part. So, you know, if you have to take a break from some of the sports skill aspects, aside from, you know, being able to throw at trash cans or like throw with another person, and, you know, y'all are being hygienic about it, then, you know, right now, mostly what you can do is just manage the qualities of athleticism that you want to see in your game. And then you can parlay those into the sport whenever Ultimate has made its way to being accessible again. I think the last question that we'll have here overall is what qualities of athleticism do I need to manage? I feel like this is a question that we get sometimes related to injuries. And certainly is like an underlying question that people seem to have whenever they ask for advice about home workouts or like outdoor workout replacements for the gym. And, you know, some of those qualities, people don't even know how to articulate them necessarily, but to use, you know, terminology that may like be in both of our vocabulary, it might be, you know, like max strength. It might be endurance qualities. It might be, you know, cardiovascular or like or aerobic qualities, and then like sprint speed sort of qualities.
Yeah. Okay. So if the name of the game with sport is going to be repeat sprintability, so there's some level of endurance, there's some level of sprinting and like power and like force output and recruitment that's needed. So from my perspective, a lot of people think of, you know, maximal weightlifting as something that's, you know, based in strength and force development and muscle size and hypertrophy and muscle strength and needing load and having to have this as part of your training in order to stay strong. But really all you're trying to do is you're trying to sort of like hijack your nervous system into allowing for larger amounts of output. So you're adding load to a system in order to get higher levels of motor unit recruitment. But you can get these sort of high levels of motor unit recruitment just by moving at max velocity and by moving yourself through space as fast as you can. So, you know, there are a lot of athletes that don't actually lift weights, and that's okay. And people that really like training like to throw these athletes under the bus and make them the exception, but they're not necessarily. And a lot of times, if you love lifting weights and that's all you do, you become really good at lifting weights, but these aren't the skills that make for a good athlete on the field. And these are conversations that I end up getting into with a lot of strength coaches, because that's their job is strength and conditioning. And a lot of their world is in the weight room. So they want to try to give these tools that they use day to day to everyone is like these panacea, like these catch-alls. It's not how it works. If your sport is predicated on sprinting and jumping and changing direction, you have to be good at those things. And yes, lifting weights, traditional weightlifting movements and carrying load, it will increase the effect of gravity on your system, as well as your system is well positioned to allow you to manage pressure a little bit better and recruit, recruit like your motor units and your muscles in a way that's going to be context relevant to the sport. But there's such a gap between the specificity of running and sprinting and changing direction and jumping on the field and the weight room that though when it comes down to like having this sort of situation where you can't train in a weight room, I'm not really worried about that. Is that kind of like, this has been a long-winded way of me getting back to this, is if you're able to sprint full speed and change direction and jump and do all of these things, and you can actually quantify to make sure that your speed isn't decreasing and your vertical jump isn't going down, then you're doing okay. And what at this point in time, like all the weightlifting movements, they can be light and they can be all based in position and just making sure that you can organize your skeleton in a good way. You don't actually have to like, no one should ever be worried that they used to trap bar deadlift 405 pounds and then they had to go and live indoors in their house for 3 months and then they can't trap bar deadlift 405 pounds anymore. So much of that comes down to just being out of practice. And I don't care about that. But if you were to tell me that your 30-yard sprint stayed the same or got better over the time that you were at home and you only could sprint, then I think you're probably going to be better off in terms of athleticism. I don't know if that answers.
No, it does. It like breaks the mold of the question itself, which I think is important. As people
it involves like a paradigm shift, right? Because people are like, oh, training is lifting weights. It's not. And people are going to argue with me until they're tired in the face, and that's okay. And everyone's entitled to their opinion, but you could train for the sport of ultimate frisbee and not lift weights. We offer weightlifting as part of what we do because it increases the ability to manage pressure well under load. So we increase the effects of gravity on the human system in a way that applies to loading and unloading hips and shoulders and using the torso to transmit force and resisting gravity. So that when we go into this unloaded state, I have the ability to recruit all of these fibers to the super maximal level. And then the most important part of this is that I can use those abilities to recruit and output force in a way that actually relates to the sport. So sprinting and cutting and changing direction, that's the only reason we lift weights. We don't lift weights to get better lifting weights.
Right. I mean, there are some other peripheral adaptations it depends on how you consider them to be peripheral. If we call them central, like vascular and capillary adaptations that could potentially help with aerobic abilities and recovering abilities and things like that.
Yeah, but you can get those just training outside.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, like so I can lower. So what Goose is referring to is like if I put myself under a tremendous like isometric load, I can change my tissue structure and I can change the way that my vasculature works. So if I like occlude and I put a bunch of fluid in my muscles, and then I can potentially increase the diameter of my vasculature so that I decrease peripheral resistance. And then I have an easier way to output blood to the muscles. But that's something that you can get just by training aerobically. Like you could get the same benefit in a way that's much more relevant by doing tempo runs than you could by just loading 300% of your max in that split squat. Right. And at less of a risk, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate you breaking the paradigm because, the more that people get familiar with training, the more that they dig themselves into this like self-referential training pit where, they believe like that as they learn terminology and as they learn like these different qualities that participate in athletic performance, they dig themselves into needing to like feed those qualities in maybe too specific of avenues rather than like understanding that these are all contributing facets to what we end up wanting to see, which is repeat sprintability. And while it's nice to be able to dissect our training and like go after those qualities very specifically in some cases so that we can reduce like the overall training load of a particular session, like instead of everything being like shuttle oriented or something like that, where there's a lot of eccentric load. And if you just do that all the time, you'd wear yourself down. We kind of break these things into their constituent parts a little bit more. The reality is we're still looking for repeat sprint ability, and what we're giving in terms of guidelines on this sheet that we've referenced, that'll be on the Learn page, will help you maintain that, and hopefully even help you advance that while you're under constraints of not being in a gym or training at home and just training outside.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's, I don't know. It's a conversation that will always come up.
Yeah.
Like when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
Like none of that should matter. Like you're only whatever tools that you have in your toolbox, you have to realize that you're using them with the overarching goal of making someone better at the sport that they're trying to train for.
Right.
It's nothing to do with how much they can back squat. If you think back squatting is like the answer to training your athletes, but none of your athletes are getting better on the field, then maybe back squats aren't the answer. And there are plenty of programs that people do where they back squat and they get better. That doesn't make back squat the end all be all of training. It doesn't. You don't have to do it. Like this, I hope people use this is like this situation of not being able to access their gym to realize that like I can feel powerful and fast and in shape without any of that stuff.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we're going to get rid of doing it. It all serves a very, very strong purpose in terms of just being able to, like I said, you increase the effect of gravity on the system by adding more load to the system.
Right.
And you have to manage that. And if you can do that in positions that are going to be relevant to what the positions that are going to be in the athletic actions on the field, then you win. And the winning just comes down to like, did you make the team that you couldn't make? Can you beat the guy on the undercut that you could never beat? Are you not tired at the end of a tournament when everyone else is? Are you not sore on Sunday mornings when everyone else is? These are the things that I care about. These are things that we care about.
Right.
Like people will try to use Goose as this avatar of what a Frisbee player should be like, but there are people who can jump higher and run faster than Goose can. But he is relentlessly aerobically fit. So they might beat him on 2 cuts, but on the 8th, they're not even close. And that's kind of that's this overarching, term that we're saying, like repeat sprint ability. Like that really is the show when it comes to field and court athletes. It's like, it's not a matter of the first 2 sprints. That's great. Like you're fast, bro. Like you're fast. Like good for you. If you can do it 30 times in a row without a big drop off in your speed, then you're going to win.
Right. Yeah. 3rd and 4th quarters matter in like the pro games, and the 3rd and 4th game of the day matter in club tournaments. You want to be the person who can kind of hit the outside edges of performance on all of those things. You want to be ideally the fastest woman on the field, and let that, permit you to run at 90% a lot of the time when people are going 100%, and you don't wear down as a result. Those things, thankfully, are not mutually exclusive, being fast and repeatably fast. But don't let these peripheral barriers right now cause you anxiety. Like, understand that the anxiety that you may be experiencing as we're social distancing and whatnot, that is more to do with habits, and it has a lot less to do with the way that your athletic development will end up somehow getting sidetracked. All right. I think we sufficiently covered that. Hopefully we did. If people have questions, they can obviously throw them our way. But these resources that we'll put on the website, I think will help take the, probably 30-minute discussion we just had on that and condense it down to some bite-sized portions and some actionable things. We'll also continue to try to post some workout ideas, things that you can do from home, just like quick snapshots of whiteboard and things like that, so that we add a little bit of variability to the workouts, so that you don't get too bored, but also just to help serve you in terms of like understanding that this is stressful, not being able to do your routine, and maybe having these very specific suggestions can reduce some of that stress for you. Now for my favorite part. What is Chris reading?
My life's been like upended recently, so I'm really slacking on the reading. I've been reading a bunch of comic books.
Nice.
Actually, that's not true. Like when I say upended, like I've read like 2 books instead of 5.
Right.
Basically. So I finally finished, let's see. Let me look through. I haven't actually looked recently at what I finished recently in the past few weeks here. So I'm reading a book on muscle hypertrophy written by Dr. Brad Schoenfeld. It's kind of like the head. He's like the guy in hypertrophy research. So that's kind of interesting. It's more of just a review of what it is. It's at this point, a lot of the mechanistic reasons for these physiological adaptations, they just get kind of thrown out. Biology is one of those sciences that's like physics and chemistry are pretty set when it comes to how things work. When you're talking about biology, it just sort of changes. And they just were like, oh yeah, like remember that thing that we thought as a model for like muscle hypertrophy? That's not a real thing anymore. Like, the hormone hypothesis of what happens after you lift weights is not a thing. So that's like, I think biology is one of the softer of the main sciences, but I just like to review like what the literature says currently, and kind of touching back on what I was saying. It's like motor unit recruitment is important. What the goal is important. So if you want size of a muscle, you have to recruit all the motor units, and then you have to fatigue the muscle in a tremendous amount to make it grow.
Right.
That's pretty much it though. And then the difference between training for size and muscles and bodybuilding versus training to be like as athletic and powerful as possible, they both require full motor unit recruitment, but one just requires more volume.
Right.
It's the only difference.
Yeah, and there are going to be a lot of our frisbee athletes that need some hypertrophy, and then there's going to be a lot of people like me who really don't need it. It's if anything, like we need to try to remain on the leaner side of things.
Yeah. So I'm looking through. What else did I read recently?
I know you read through a portion of this Fuel Your Performance book that my buddy.
Oh yeah, I did. I read some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just it's a really comprehensively put together. It's just about like he's pulled a lot of principles from various disciplines and try to put it into a package that sort of explains like nutrition to someone who's training more for performance. So that would be an interesting thing to pick up. I think we can make a link in like the show notes.
Yeah.
I read, before moving here, I read a book on managing your day-to-day and about routines. So that's been sort of helpful in keeping myself sane. I recently finished a marketing book. I don't remember where we were at last time, or what I was reading last time. I got a book. I got Mladen Jovanovich's new book about strength training. It's like 2 volumes. So I'm reading through that. Trying to stay current on what's going on with this virus.
Right.
So there's a lot of, I've done a lot of reading every day in regards to that. I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've been reading that book. I haven't been reading a ton of other stuff. I've been podcasting it up, especially during training. I heard a really interesting discussion about mental health and how there's a lot of confusion between what people believe to be mental health and how it actually might be brain health. And so like what's being attributed
I'd
to
say those things are not different.
Yeah, a lot of times
they're separate. Yeah.
Right. A lot of times that they're not, but the interesting thing that he's pointing out is that, basically people, especially whenever they're trying to sort through mental illness, they're being prescribed or diagnosed due to like a cluster of symptoms, which is just not how it happens in any other sort of field in biology.
Oh yeah, it's so I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but yeah, like prescribing antidepressants and antipsychotics and SSRIs and stuff like that is a crapshoot, and they don't actually really know what it's doing. And now that they're realizing that more of the neurotransmitter development in a human being is coming from the gut, the more like any time that neurology is a really tough subject, and the best neurologists in the world don't really know the answers.
Right.
They have like a best guess, and when you know that all models are wrong, you just have to use the ones that are useful. A lot of those models are wrong,
right.
And they figure out that these drugs are useful to help with these symptoms, but then they realize that like sometimes they're not. And the answers to these questions are not definitive. And you have all these scenarios where like someone's diet and the way that someone like organizes their life, or just the person's like mental clarity and their self-awareness can have so much to do with this health. Like this mental health it's not the psychology and the biology and the physiology. They're not separate things.
Right.
It's all this like dynamic system, and everything can influence everything else. So all you can do in that scenario is you have to create these safe to fail experiments, and then you try something and see how it goes. And then you realize that like this thing affected this, and this thing affected this, or this didn't work. But then when you come to this fork in the road where all of a sudden you're just giving everyone these antidepressants that might not be what they need.
Right.
And if something doesn't work, you're just giving someone something that you don't really know how it works. So that's just what bothers me the most about that. It just seems sort of like dangerous science.
Right. Yeah, I think the most basic thing that I took away from it was how very rarely these people who are looking for help end up having their brains looked at all. It's not even necessarily like an MRI to see if there's a tumor or something like that, but rather, taking a look at it with regard to blood flow and what that looks like at rest versus under a cognitive load, and maybe deciphering based on which areas are not getting blood when they should be during those particular phases of rest and work, whether or not there might be environmental concerns like toxic mold, or there may be something very equally important things relevant to like their internal environment or their external environment at play that are just not being addressed. And so, as you insinuated, prescription drugs a lot of times are just like entirely the wrong route when, maybe their positioning and like the compression of their upper thorax could be causing significant problems as far as like blood flow and oxygenation. Or it could be things that are happening in their gut, like you attributed to earlier.
Just remember like what you're designed for as an organism. Right. You're designed to move. Movement is everything. Like your ability to expand and compress works on a biomechanical level. It works on a metaphysical level. It works on a psychological level. Like rigidity will lead to some type of problem. So you just got to stay moving. You got to keep your mind active. You got to keep your routine set. It doesn't mean that you have to like exercise and do this specific thing, but like go for a walk. Like going for a walk is huge. If you want to change someone's neurochemistry in their brain, that person goes for a walk. And they've proven this through research with like Parkinson's.
Yep.
You can hijack and you can kind of rewire your brain by having like the goal of just going for a walk. And that's like where you're going to be at in terms of like your good mental headspace as well. It's having self-awareness and meditation, like all of these things require you to like, if you're compressed, you expand your mind. If your environment is compressed, you get and you're inside all the time, like go outside. Like it's just having this sort of ebb and flow and this continuum that you put yourself on where you never get stagnant. You can't. You got to stay moving.
Yep.
And I want to drop the mic on that.
Boom. Mic dropped. Thanks for listening. If you made it all the way through, this episode was sponsored by Game Point Performance.
Check it out. If there's a body weight, if we're expecting people to be stuck at home for long periods of time, we're going to release a body weight program. Everyone that's a member can follow along with if they'd like, and then anyone that's a new member, we will probably have some type of promotion to make it more cost effective for people to jump into that. So we don't want to price anybody out. So we know that this is a weird time economically for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty uncertain. All right. Again, yeah, thanks for listening. And Chris, thanks for hosting / joining. So, the big thing I wanted to allude to is that we're going to have one of the Team USA GPP sponsored athletes on our next episode.
So the three people that made it to the end of the podcast that are going to know that.
Yeah,
so Charlie
exactly.
Cooper.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a just so you know, bud. We're gonna have someone from the World's team on the next podcast because you're probably the only. There's probably 5 people that will listen to this to the end.
Yeah.
Definitely one of them.
Right. We already started to
Probably the
dial,
first one.
especially when we started to dial it down. They're like, "All right, I'm done. Next thing." But yeah, we'll have a special guest. I won't spoil the surprise yet. But
Maybe more than one guest.
yeah. All right. Cool.